From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Should Arizona move the date of its primary election? There's a bill to do just that. We'll break down the pros and cons of earlier elections.
Do Africanized killer bees really live up to their name? We break down what you need to know about the creatures buzzing around the valley.
And if you missed the first two supermoons of 2019, you still have one more chance. We'll tell you where and when you can catch the last supermoon of the year.
Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Haley Brandt.
And I'm Bayan Wang. Thank you for joining us.
This afternoon, the House Elections Committee heard a bill that would move Arizona's primary election date up by about 2 weeks.
Cronkite News reporter Bryce Newberry joins us live with the impact this would have for the state. Bryce?
Senate Bill 1154 would move Arizona's primary election date during a general election year to the first Tuesday in August. The bill just passed the House Elections Committee this afternoon 6-4. Late this afternoon, a representative from the Arizona Secretary of State's office told the House Elections Committee that the bill is missing key elements in order to actually work in Arizona. And the League of Arizona Cities and Towns testified the bill would cause some Arizona cities to violate their charters. A change to the primary election date. Starting in 2020, the next time we'll vote for president.
From an election administration perspective, the more time we have between those two elections, the better. You never know what race is going to take a long time to count in the primary or what race is going to be challenged in court in the primary.
But from the voters' perspective, a change like this could cause confusion.
The biggest issue for voters is going to be familiarizing themselves with the new calendar and then to not be surprised when literature starts hitting their door earlier, when official publications start hitting their door earlier, when the early ballot hits the door earlier.
The date change would cause a domino effect, moving up all other deadlines leading up to the primary.
The sacrifice being asked of voters is to adjust their behavior just a little bit.
That adjustment could come with a side effect.
We really want to make sure that voters aren't suppressed, as an inadvertent effect of this by creating confusion with, voters across our state.
But voters could get a different positive side effect when choosing their next president.
When it comes to, getting in more candidates to come and speak to Arizona voters, potentially moving back the primary election could help with that.
Bannerman told us the Democratic Party would even be open to considering an earlier date like May for the election. The last time the primary date changed was in 2009 when it moved 1 week earlier. Senate Bill 1154 has a trailer bill, Senate Bill 1289, which would make the corrections brought up by the Secretary of State's office this afternoon. The bill still has to be approved by the full House before it moves on to the governor's office. Live in the studio, Bryce Newberry, Cronkite News.
Governor Doug Ducey met with Mexican Ambassador to the United States, Martha Bárcena, discussing efforts to strengthen Arizona-Mexico economic ties.
Austin Westfall joins us live with more on what the governor was able to accomplish. Austin?
Yeah, this was Bárcena's first official visit to Arizona as U.S. ambassador. Both Governor Ducey and Ambassador Bárcena specifically focused today's public meeting on the importance of maintaining and growing trade relations between Arizona and Mexico. They also highlighted the cultural and geographic ties that have united the two territories for decades.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Governor Ducey and Ambassador Bárcena made their first joint public appearance at the Canby Hotel in Phoenix. The governor has been pushing in Congress for the ratification of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, known as the USMCA. This agreement is President Trump's replacement for the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Today, Ducey highlighted the importance of pushing this treaty through in order to continue building a strong financial partnership with Mexico.
In 2018, Arizona's total trade with Mexico and Canada exceeded $20 billion, but there's a lot more room to grow.
The contributions of the Mexican community to the economy, the society, and the culture of the U.S. are undeniable. The U.S. of today cannot be explained without the Mexican presence.
Today's meeting happened under the umbrella of the 60th anniversary of the Arizona-Mexico Commission, a nonprofit cross-border organization pushing for economic prosperity and growth between Arizona and Mexico. Ambassador Bárcena will also visit Tucson to meet with community and state officials there, focusing on border and immigration issues. In the broadcast center, Austin Westfall, Cronkite News.
And refugee advocates say not enough is being done to save those fleeing their countries.
Several organizations recently came together hoping to bring awareness to the issue by having participants walk a mile in a refugee's shoes. Cronkite News reporter Marcela Bayeto went to southern Arizona for the event.
Separated our family. I had a reaction. I was starting to feel kind of anxious.
That's how Mary Butler felt after her 5 boys were separated from her during this mock exercise in Tucson. It was a part of the Walk a Mile in a Refugee's Shoe simulation taking place on U of A's campus. The experience taking participants through a 7-stage simulation process to hopefully better understand the journey refugees go through during their resettlement process.
The Where Are the Refugees campaign, we're really trying to continue to put pressure on our legislators and bring awareness to the community that we welcome refugees.
Stations included things like shelter, border crossing, education, and medical.
Unfortunately, we're running really low on medication.
All attempting to shed light on what refugees really go through.
Another one of the stations is this water simulation where participants can understand what it's like for refugees to collect their water at these refugee camps. Now, I wanted to try it out for myself.
Participants walking along the entire perimeter of the event had to carry jugs of water, resembling the trek many refugees do daily.
The average American goes through 100 gallons of water per day per person. Each refugee is only allotted 5 gallons per day.
Former refugees like Jean Paul and his family agree the simulation was a good way of getting others to understand what they went through when they fled the Congo back in 1996.
People who are in camp, they are suffering. All of them, they seek to come here.
According to Sumik, a former refugee from Bosnia, one of the goals for Walk a Mile in a Refugee's Shoes is to bring awareness to the declining number of refugees allowed into the U.S. because of President Trump's admission cap.
We are 6 months into that federal fiscal year. However, we're not reaching even half of the 30,000 allotted refugees.
As for Arizona, Sumik says the state has resettled over 80,000 refugees in the past few decades, but now they'd be lucky if even just 1,000 are able to be allowed in. For refugee families like Jean Paul's, coming to the U.S. is what opened the door to a better future.
This event, it is good. We are remembering how we were in refugee camps.
In Tucson, Marcela Bayeto, Cronkite News.
According to the Arizona Department of Economic Security, since the 1970s, more than 60,000 refugees have made Arizona home.
New information released this morning reveals details about the Michael Cohen raid last April. Dozens of pages of partially redacted documents were released just a few hours ago. They show that investigators went after Cohen's email accounts for data going back to 2015 during Cohen's time at the Trump Organization. According to the documents, prosecutors asked for data from Cohen's cell phones the month before the 2016 election. A section detailing Cohen's campaign finance violations was redacted, as well as some sections on Cohen's payments to women who say they had affairs with Trump. Cohen's lawyer says the unsealing of the documents shows his client is willing to cooperate and provide information about Donald Trump and the Trump administration. Cohen was sentenced to 3 years in prison for numerous crimes, and he's expected to begin that sentence in May.
State lawmakers are taking up the issue of teen suicide. A new bill would require school staff to undergo suicide prevention training. Cronkite News reporter Tavia Madison was at the Capitol for the latest hearing on Senate Bill 1468.
If you woke up tomorrow and heard that 3 people you knew had died by suicide, you'd be concerned.
About 3 lives per day in the valley are lost due to suicide. This is a number Representative Alma Hernandez is all too familiar with.
You know, my best friend committed suicide 7 years ago.
Dorothy was just 22 years old when she died by suicide. Hernandez says coping with that loss wouldn't have been possible without her school's resources.
We had a great support team there at the University of Arizona who reached out to me and said, how can we help you? Those are the things we need to ensure that every child in our schools have that available to them.
Lawmakers want to ensure students have those resources with Senate Bill 1468. The bill would require suicide prevention training for all staff in schools, working with students from grades 6 to 12.
Teachers spend a great deal of time watching our kids, having eyes on our kids. We want to make sure that they have the knowledge of what to watch for.
Teachers across the valley currently have access to the training, but it's not mandatory. That's why lawmakers say it's time for a change.
Deaths by suicide are about twice as many as homicides. So think of that. Murders are a horrible situation, and there are about twice as many deaths by suicide. And yet, suicide is preventable.
And to prevent those deaths, Epstein says there are 3 essential elements:
prevention, intervention, and postvention.
The bill passed the Education Committee yesterday with a vote of 13-0, and lawmakers are hopeful for more progress.
Treatment works, recovery happens. If we can help kids, we can stop it.
In Phoenix, Tavia Madison, Cronkite News.
If the bill passes, Arizona would join states like Texas and Georgia in becoming the 29th state to mandate suicide prevention training. And coming up next on Cronkite News, many activists are not willing to wait for federal intervention when it comes to tackling climate change.
We'll have more on how local cities are trying to make a change.
Plus, the EPA proposed loosening its mercury emission standards, how a local group of activist moms are pushing back.
I'm Judy Woodruff, anchor and managing editor of the PBS NewsHour. The journalists of tomorrow face a fast-changing media landscape, but quality news remains vitally important to our communities, our country, and our world. At ASU's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication, students learn solid, reliable reporting, holding the powerful accountable, and rebuilding the public's trust. The Cronkite School and Arizona PBS, preparing the next generation for a stronger future of journalism.
With wildfires, a scarcity of water, and other environmental issues facing the Earth today, it's critical to stay up to date with local impacts of a changing climate. That's why we created Elemental, Covering Sustainability, a multimedia collaboration between public television and radio stations. From climate change to water conservation to renewable energy and much more, Elemental covers the latest in sustainability news. Find our stories on our website, elementalreports.com.
Many cities in the U.S. have created plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and more to address climate change. Phoenix is among them. As
Cronkite News reporter Jennifer Alvarez reports, more Arizona cities are jumping on board instead of waiting for federal intervention.
Phoenix has had a climate action plan for years. The city is working toward clean energy in buildings, zero waste, clean transportation, and more.
Currently today, we're degrading our systems, our rivers, our streams, our oceans, our air, often using air just like a landfill. And so you see the brown cloud around Phoenix, like we need to do things about that.
One of those things is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Phoenix by 30% by 2025. Tempe is just starting its climate action plan.
We want to leave Tempe better than we found it.
It's a movement seen across the globe. Cities are tackling climate change on their own rather than wait for federal or state government. More than 9,000 cities have joined the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy to commit to climate action initiatives. Mark Hartman, the Chief Sustainability Officer for Phoenix, says climate action isn't something cities should hide from.
The message often with climate is like, oh, this is horrible, just duck and cover. No, actually, this is like, imagine if we can actually go and use innovation and be reducing waste by 80% and 90%. Like, wouldn't that be awesome?
Hartman says climate action plans can help cities spend less in the future and taxpayers reap savings.
Here we are, we're buying renewable energy, and it's actually costing us less.
Braden Kay, Tempe's sustainability director, says cities should also think about communities that could be affected by climate change.
How do we make sure that low-income communities and communities on the margin have resources to invest in energy efficiency?
State climatologist Nancy Sullivan agrees.
So it's really hot in the daytime. So a lot of people can just go in the air conditioning, no big deal. A lot of people can't. A lot of the people who are in a fixed income or have a low income, some of them don't have working air conditioning at all.
Tempe's climate action plan will focus on sustainable energy, transportation, and extreme heat. And Kay says these initiatives are ultimately about helping everyone.
If we don't help raise all boats, then our climate actions that we're taking won't really matter.
Cities aren't the only ones paying close attention to climate change. Last week, signs pleading for reform and young faces flooded rallies across the world.
Step up and do something about climate change, or get the heck out of the way.
Arizona youth say lawmakers should do something about climate change, and they should do it now.
This is a national emergency, and we cannot let them forget it.
Aditi Narayanan, one of the organizers for the youth climate strike in Arizona, says people need to know the effects of climate change.
People think climate change is just a glacier melting up in the North Pole, but I want to illustrate that it's affecting them, that extreme heat patterns, that drought that directly affects them in their livelihoods and their health.
And students say it's up to them to stand up to climate change when no one else will.
As the youth, we are the people that are going to be affected by this. And so it is important for us to take a stand when the adults refuse to come to the table and fight for us.
Say they're pushing for the Green New Deal, which aims to move to 100% clean energy, create sustainable jobs, and support sustainable businesses. Live in the Broadcast Center, Jennifer Alvarez, Cronkite News.
The Environmental Protection Agency estimates that its limits on mercury emissions from power plants are preventing up to 11,000 premature deaths a year. But at what cost? Reporter Michael Bledsoe was on hand as the EPA proposed loosening those standards, and a group of activist moms pushed back.
Phoenix mom Claudia Faldoa was under the weather, but that wasn't enough to stop her from getting to Washington to testify at EPA headquarters.
I came all the way from Arizona to Washington because I have 3 boys, and I think as a parent it's very important to protect their health.
Protect their health from air pollution that Faldoa and other members of the Moms Clean Air Force say will increase if the EPA is allowed to relax its mercury and air toxic standards, or MATS.
I mean the boys of the communities of color and low-income families, and I believe we have a voice, and it's important for me to make it here.
The changes follow a Supreme Court ruling on how the EPA weighs costs and benefits of its regulations. And the EPA now says that MATS costs as much as $9.6 billion a year for just $6 million in health benefits.
The total projected cost of compliance with MATS drastically outweighs the monetized hazardous air pollutant benefits of the rule.
Weatherhead said the EPA did not meet its obligation to weigh costs and benefits in its 2016 finding on MATS. The agency now says it's not appropriate and necessary to regulate hazardous air pollutants from major sources like power plants. But Gabriela Rivera, a regional field manager for Moms Clean Air Force who works to increase Latino civic engagement in California and Arizona, says the government should not be putting a price tag on health.
I potentially want to become a mother, and how this would have an impact on, how mercury has an impact on women who are pregnant, and how it would affect me potentially in the future, and I wouldn't want to put my future children at risk.
Faldoa says the rollback of these rules won't benefit anyone.
If we allowed more pollution when we need less, that's unacceptable. That is not right.
In Washington, Micah Bledsoe, Cronkite News.
The EPA's website says the comment period on the proposal is still open, and comments must be received on or before Wednesday, April 17th.
And coming up next on Cronkite News, you have one more chance to catch a supermoon in 2019.
And the phenomenon begins tonight. We will tell you where and when you'll be able to see it, and why this supermoon is dubbed a worm moon.
And tomorrow finally marks the first official day of spring. I'll tell you what you can expect coming up.
Stay in the know on the go. At Cronkite News, we work hard to report the facts and keep you updated, whether we're on set or on the scene.
Taking it from the studio to the field. So I'm here in South Phoenix.
In Phoenix, we're just a click away. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or find us online at cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
If you're looking for one show that tells you what happened that day in the world of business, it's NPR.
We saw a classic shipwreck.
Nordstrom's opening stores.
Triple-digit gains.
Crude climbs.
We're there to help our audience find new investment ideas.
The market still has room to go up.
Nightly Business Report is the longest-running business television program in history.
Weeknights at 10:30 on Arizona PBS.
If you missed the last two supermoons of 2019, you'll have just one more chance this year to see the phenomenon, all beginning tonight. The night sky will be a little bit brighter with the third and final supermoon of 2019. Supermoons happen when the moon is full or nearly full and is at its closest point to Earth along its orbit. This supermoon has been referred to as the superworm equinox moon because the moon will be full on the same evening as Wednesday's equinox. The March equinox marks the start of spring for the Northern Hemisphere, and full moons that occur in March are often referred to as worm moons because spring brings warmer temperatures and, therefore, more worms. Lauren Sheeler joining us now. So, Lauren, what are the temperatures going to look like tonight as people go out, maybe try to get a glimpse of this super worm moon?
Yeah, well, it's been absolutely gorgeous out today, and that's certainly not going to change anytime soon. So we were hitting high 80s today, and we're only dropping into the low 70s for tonight, and then low 60s for the low. So certainly clear conditions as we're tracking radar. We're not really tracking a whole lot. We're not seeing massive widespread cloud coverage. We're only seeing some isolated showers for up north just later on in the week. So this is setting us up for prime conditions if you have the chance to get out there and get a good glimpse, your last chance for the year, of this super moon. And tomorrow kicks off the first official day of spring. Beautiful temperatures to accompany that. We're seeing 80s in the valley. Same goes for down south in Tucson, of course, a bit cooler. 50s for up north in places like Flagstaff and the Grand Canyon. But don't get too comfortable. These temperatures are slightly above average for this time of year. Looking ahead for the next couple of days to the first day of spring, you're going to see breezy conditions, looking at gusts up to 20 miles per hour. There's the above average temperatures of low 80s. Then we fall back into where we should be, but it's nothing but 70s and sunshine for the rest of your week. For Cronkite Weather, I'm Lauren Sheeler.
And coming up next on Cronkite News,
do so-called killer bees really live up to their name?
We break down what you need to know about the creatures buzzing around the valley.
I'm Matt Berry, ESPN Sports Center anchor and graduate of ASU's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication. With its bachelor's and master's degrees in sports journalism, the Cronkite School is preparing the next generation of sports journalists to tell stories that matter, stories that excite, inspire, and inform. Cronkite immerses students in covering sports at all levels in one of the country's top sports markets. It's this hands-on experience under the guidance of award-winning sports media veterans that shape the top journalists of tomorrow.
It's important for us, for our own legacy, to continue to expand what PBS can offer to everybody as far as educational platforms, arts, science, nature, and then, of course, all the masterpiece stuff.
We think that our contribution will help to increase to make sure that these programs continue to exist.
We want those things to continue to go on forever.
For more information about including Arizona PBS in your future plans, visit azpbs.org/giving.
Millions of people die every year from drinking dirty water. I would never have felt I had the ability to do something without ASU pushing me. We built filtration systems out of local materials with the people. To see those kids drink clean water for the first time, it's the most rewarding feeling that you can ever have. I went to ASU because I wanted to change the world. The thing I never would have expected is how the world would have changed me.
Spring comes early for Arizona, which is a good thing.
But the springtime weather that is warming you up is also warming up Africanized killer bees. As Love Junius reports, that may not be a good thing.
In Arizona, it's a longer time because of the temperatures. What happens is during that time, people are more active and they encounter the bees more because they're out.
They may not always live up to their nickname of killer, but Africanized bees are aggressive and will swarm and chase you up to a mile if they feel threatened. While not all bees are that aggressive, Dyke says the defense reaction of the Africanized bee is natural for any bee.
If you walk by a hive or disturb a hive, those bees' first response is to defend that hive. And so that's when people get stung. If you are stung, try to get the stingers out as quickly as possible.
In Arizona, that can mean finding a hive in a cactus, says Gloria Hoffman, a honeybee researcher at the USDA Agriculture Research Service in Tucson.
You can look at the cactus and see, if there's a hole, and if you see bees coming and going out of that hole, there's probably a good chance there's a nest there.
As many as 100 people die from each year from bee or wasp stings, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The Mayo Clinic says that for most people, a bee sting will mean swelling and pain for a few hours. But if there are signs of nausea or dizziness, you could be having a more serious allergic reaction. If stung, Dyke says the best way to get the stinger out is by swiping a card away from the direction it came in. If you try to pull it out, it will pump more venom into your skin. Although Africanized bees can be dangerous, Dyke says they have their good side too. They help pollinate crops and secure the diversity of Arizona wildflowers.
They are just another honeybee, but they do have kind of a nasty reputation at times.
In Washington, Love Junius, Cronkite News.
Cronkite News is proud to be the news division of Arizona PBS. Here's what's coming up on Arizona Horizon and PBS NewsHour.
On the next Arizona Horizon, we will look at mental illness through the lens of evolution. And we'll air another segment from the new Arizona PBS show celebrating the 100th anniversary of Grand Canyon National Park.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next NewsHour, we sit down with the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Ben Carson. That's Tuesday on the PBS NewsHour.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us.
For the top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.